aqua friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Nicole and Easter is around the corner. I just fell in love with this cute reference photo that I found on Splash, or it might be Pixabay. Those are my two go-to sites, but I will have the reference photo in the description of the video for you guys to download if you want. And I basically traced this bunny on, I think this is an 8x10 or 9x12 Hanamool collection series, cold pressed 140-pound paper, and wanted to show you what I did here. So I taped it. It's just a normal paper taped on only one side, but just to help keep it flat, I'm manually taped down the other sides, even though I'm not going to put a background on this one. So I have some moon glow here, quinacridone red, phthalo blue, indigo blue are basically the colors that I'm using. So for this bunny, I want him to be super fluffy, and I'm going to take my time and wet the paper really well. I'm going to wet the whole bunny, but I'm also going to go beyond the border of the back part of the bunny because I want that to really bleed out into the background so that he looks super fluffy, but not everywhere, because then, you know, his head would be all distorted and it might look a little funny. So just in that specific area of his back being super fluffy, I'm painting around the eyeball. I'm using my flat hacky brush. It does hold a lot of water and it's going to help get my paper nice and wet. So using this for the big parts of getting my bunny wet, because he's a pretty big bunny. Like I said, I am working on, I think it's an 8x10 paper. And then getting into those nicks and crannies and the smaller parts, I'm switching to just a round brush here, a mop brush. I absolutely love these new brushes that I got from Amazon. I think I told you the story before. I was gonna grab the Silver Series brushes that are pretty expensive, and they did last me a good long time, but I did find they're starting to split and they're just not painting as well. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to give these a go because they had such great ratings, and I am totally sold. So I actually ended up ordering another set so that I have a couple of them. They're pretty cheap and they hold a lot of water and they just paint like a dream. So I'll have that for you too in the description of the video. So notice you can now see that my paper is buckling. That is how much water I am putting on here. And I'm taking my time doing this and wetting it really, really well. The longer it stays wet, the more time we're going to have in order to put down all the colors that I want to put down. So I'm also wanting to make sure that I have some nice clean edges along the sides of the bunny. Okay, so once you're happy with the amount of wetness that you have on there, so I'm sure you don't want to watch me wet my paper in real time, or maybe you do. But I do spend a good couple of minutes, and, you know, I'll go over it a couple of times. So a good thing to do is wet your area that you're going to paint, and then maybe pre-wet your colors in your palette so that they're nice and juicy and ready to go, and then wet your paper again. So I do that a lot of the times too. Now the bunny is black and white, but of course we need to put some sort of color on the white parts as well. That's where this moon glow comes in. I love the moon glow. Sometimes I mix it with a little bit of that phthalo blue, and it has great colors for shadows. So getting in the shadows around his ear, along the ends of his cute little feet here. And I also am pulling in whatever, I think it's buff titanium. It's a little bit of a yellowy creamy color that I have in my palette. Okay, so getting those colors in there. Now the main color I'm using for the black is just neutral tint. And I am putting that on now on the back part. I'm constantly looking at my reference photo and seeing where those breaks are in the pattern of the dark spots. I'm dabbing that in there. So trying to work as fast as I can because all the time your paper's drying. So working with the right size brush is going to help. You want to use a bigger brush for larger areas instead of smaller brushes because it'll cover more and you'll get the same job done a lot faster than using a smaller brush. Now I do have just a fluffy dry brush if there's some areas I want to soften up further. On his ear you do see some of that skin tone color in there, so I am mixing in some of that quinacridone red at this point in order to get that, and a teeny bit on his nose. We can't forget that part. So notice that his face is really drying now, so I'm really leaning over and trying to see where my paper might still be a teeny bit wet and or where it's really drying and that I might have to stay away from. So I do want to darken up the black on the bunny because right now it's just too light, and so I'm really going for a more concentrated mixture of the neutral tint. Using a fluffy brush to try to spread that out. Here and there you'll see me switching. All right, so on his back I am going for some of that darker color. Now I do notice that my brush strokes are very well defined. That means that my paper is drying a lot more now and it's not spreading as much, which means time is running out as well. So I am using my fluffy brush to try and soften that a little bit, and I notice that it's not softening as much. So at this point I really did run out of time and I have to let the whole thing dry. So once your bunny's completely dry, then we could come back in and do one more coat of just the really dark colors of the neutral tint on his back. And so I'm re-wetting the areas where I need to maybe put a little bit more shadow and where I want to increase that saturation of the darker fur. So for this step, you really have to make sure that you have clean brushes and clean water when you're re-wetting. Otherwise, you will get a stain, a very light stain, where you re-wetted and it'll be a solid line, like a haze of a solid line. It won't look nice. So it's really important to work with really clean water and clean brushes. So since my paper is very wet, I could work with a really thick mixture on my paintbrush. Notice now I'm getting that pigmentation that I need, that really dark black color. So if you have too much moisture on your brush, you could always wipe it off on a piece of paper towel. I always have a paintbrush in one hand and a piece of paper towel in the other, and I'm constantly adjusting the moisture level. Now to put in a couple of white hairs, you can lift up color over top of the black that we already put down. It's not black, it's neutral tint, but you guys know what I mean. So a damp script liner brush. I'm constantly wiping off my script liner brush on a piece of paper towel. And you want to do this sparingly and just do a few strokes of the hairs on his back. And I'm pretty happy with how dark his fur is now. The only other thing I need to do is I'm going to re-wet the front part here, and I need to increase some of the shadows under his belly and between his legs. So I'm going back in with that moon glow and adding in some of those shadows. Now in this second half of this video, I had injured my finger the day before by slicing the tip of my thumb off using a slicer for doing onions, and I didn't use a guard. I'm very mad at myself because now I lost all that fine motor dexterity trying to finish this rabbit, but I did get it done nonetheless. So if some of your strokes are too defined, what I did there is I wet his ear, and I'm just re-wetting that area and stroking clean water over it will soften those strokes. While it's wet, I'm using my script liner brush, and I'm pulling out some of the neutral tint colors and just trying to blend it a little bit more with those darker patches. On the other side of his face, next to his ear, I do need some contrast there so that we can tell that that's where the ear starts and the face begins, and vice versa. So it's almost like you're drawing in these tiny lines, and then you can fade it out with some clean water. Now, to outline the waterline of the animal's eye, I'm actually using a mixture of the little bit of the pink that I have on my palette mixed with that moon glow. And I do apologize that my head is kind of getting in the shot here, especially with my injured thumb. I really had to lean over to see what I was doing, so I don't have that fine motor dexterity as much, but I was doing the best I could here. I like to put a base of some blue down. That's going to be like the bright spot in his eye. It's kind of like a highlight from the sky, if you will. And then I can start shading in the dark pupil part. And I just build that up slowly with layers. You want to go darker along the edges of his eye, and you get a really nice dimensional look to it. Now my last little touches are just a couple of whiskers with a very fine rigger brush, pulling out some of those cute whiskers along his face. But he did turn out so darling, and I hope you guys will give this a go. Let me know what you think. I hope you enjoy this tutorial, and I will see you guys next time.